would now like to invite the guest speakers for the plenary discussion this morning's program, and they'll discuss driving student success with analytics and personalised support. I'd now like to introduce this session's moderator, Belinda Howell. So let's give a brief introduction to Belinda. Belinda has held multiple senior roles in international higher education over the last 10 years and is now active in supporting EdTech companies. Following a successful corporate career, she led UTS College into a period of significant growth in its international student cohorts and expanded its in-market presence through Asia and the Middle East. Belinda coaches leaders in the education and non-profit sectors and is on the board of a number of organisations. Welcome, Belinda.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I hope you can all hear me now. I've had a little bit of trouble getting myself set up.
No, we can hear you well.
Excellent.
I'll hand over to you now, Belinda.
Right, okay. So I'm delighted to introduce the two panelists in this discussion. Would like to welcome Sacha Nouwens, whose name's already been mentioned several times, from OES. Sacha is the Executive Director of Student Experience and Insights, and also Associate Professor Marcus O'Donnell from Deakin University. Welcome, Marcus. And Marcus has a wonderful title called Director Cloud Learning Futures, which hopefully we can unpack a bit during this discussion. So thank you both for joining me. And just for me to acknowledge that amongst the companies I'm working with is one named Link Education, which is really operating absolutely in this space of data analytics and personalised academic support. So we should all have a good conversation together. Okay, let's kick off by just outlining exactly what we're actually all doing, because we were going to start with lots of the theory about why and the philosophy of this, but let's actually introduce everybody here by talking about what each of us is working on at present in our institutions or in our other parts of our lives. So could I start with Sacha and invite you to just let me know, or let us all know, how you and OES are using data analytics now to support student success. What are you working on, Sacha?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Belinda. It's great to be here with you and Marcus this morning. As you just heard Claire share, OES does partner with universities to help them either deliver their courses fully online or to help them digitise parts of that experience. And analytics is absolutely critical to that. Analytics, I think, can help in so many different ways. Universities come to us at different stages of sophistication and looking to solve different specific problems, but very often they're talking about student success and wanting to retain students. So we work with those universities to help them make sure really they're making the best use of their data. I wanted to share a couple of examples of the types of initiatives we can do to give you a bit of a flavour for that. One type of thing we do is the more, I guess, the everyday experience that students have. People want to make sure that universities want to make sure that students are experiencing things the best way, and key to that is the actual course content. And one of the ways that we really help with analytics is being able to help, as educators continuously change and improve their course content. We use analytics to show them what that change has had. Has it had the result they intended? Has it increased students' the amount of time they spend studying? Has it helped them achieve better results? So I guess that's one way that analytics can really help day to day. And then the other area we really step in is when things start to go wrong for students, the sort of the uh-oh times when things get hard, and analytics, we use that to really help identify the students, help universities identify those students that are going to be at risk, help them understand why, and then really help them take the steps they need to be able to provide support to those students.
Okay. That's great, Sacha. That sounds so interesting, and we'll delve into the details shortly. Marcus, could I get a snapshot from you on what's going on at Deakin?
I mean, we've been doing very similar things at Deakin for a long time. We've had what we call a priority students program, which is very much similar to the OES model that was flashed up on screen, in terms of trying to bring a whole lot of different data sets together to say, okay, in this group of students who are the ones that might need some intervention, some support to make sure that they stay around, first of all, and do well. So, you know, we take a whole range of data sets, and then that will lead to a whole set of personalised support, from phone calls to peer mentoring to a whole range of different things. One of the other, so that kind of underpins everything. One of the other things we're working on at the moment is what we're calling the Teacher Dashboard Project. So instead of that kind of institutional approach, we are trying to get together data insights for every individual teacher so that they can see more clearly what's actually happening to the students in their group.
Okay. Thanks, Marcus. And I'll just add in here that I'm working with this company called Link Education at present, and they do, in a sense, a subset of what Sacha and OES are doing. And that their sweet spot is about the personalised academic support. They start from that proposition, personalised academic support, and then the system and the analytics supports and enhances that. And at this stage, they're working principally with online courses. So there's something they started actually well before COVID, but now of course it's very topical. Which leads me to my next question actually was, has your work been COVID influenced, in the sense that has the focus increased or changed following the COVID induced move to online learning and teaching?
Do you want me to start?
Sorry.
Yeah,
oh,
sorry.
Somebody jump in.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I feel like COVID's changed everything. Here I am sitting in my music studio at home online. For us, the biggest change, the impact of COVID was that we used to just use our analytics services internally, and through COVID, as universities started needing to move online really quickly, it was an opportunity for us to really reach out and start to help universities with their analytics and digitize other elements of their student experience. Apart from that, most of the programs OES works with were already online or blended. So it didn't shift the way we taught or the way we did analytics so much. Okay,
and you, Marcus?
Yeah, our experience is very, very similar. We already had, you know, an incredibly big online cohort. Nearly all our courses were already online. So, you know, as Sacha just said, you know, it changed everything, but didn't actually change a lot of the day-to-day stuff that we were doing in terms of online. I think it's brought a new sense of focus on what does digital education really mean, because that's what everyone is talking about. And the big question, of course, during COVID for teachers who are not familiar with online was the area of student engagement. How do we actually keep students engaged, not only online? Of course, there were lots of things going on in students and teachers' lives last year that, you know, meant that perhaps education wasn't their number one priority.
Okay, thanks. So I'm hearing that the goal has been around retaining students, giving them a better experience, particularly of the online arena, and helping universities to understand better what their students are experiencing and how they're progressing. Is there anything else that we should add in there?
I think one other area, and I can't really claim that Deakin is doing this, but it's something we're very interested in exploring, is the type of analytics that feed directly to the student. So most of the work in learning analytics has been focused at the institution level or at the teacher level. I think the area that you can see in the research where there's the most promise is analytics directly fed to the students, so they get a really good idea of their own self-regulating processes, their own motivations, their own engagement. That's certainly something that we're very interested in experimenting with.
Okay, that's a great segue, Marcus, into what I was going to ask about next, which is what is the important data? We talk about data, and data can be huge. Data is huge.
Yeah.
What do both of you see as being the most important elements of the data you collect for the purposes of helping student success?
Do you want to start, Marcus?
Oh, you start, Sacha.
Oh, okay. For us, it's the combination of the data. We try and understand the interactions students are having in the systems. You know, the learning management system is really key to that, but also the interactions they're having with staff are critical. So having, you know, we've got a good CRM, and that's really important for us to know when students are reaching out or when we're talking to staff members and what they're asking. And we've found that early on, when students first enroll with one of our partner universities, it's more difficult for us to predict who's going to be successful. But as time goes by, you know, even a matter of weeks, really observing their behaviour, we can quite quickly get a quite accurate prediction early on which students are going to just fly on their own, and which ones do need a little bit of an extra helping hand. And yeah, but really find that it's not one single data point; it's the combination of all of it together.
Okay. So, Marcus, anything?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think it is the interaction between the different data sets. Data is everywhere. Now that we're using digital systems, and we can also set up things that produce data in certain ways. So we can actually kind of, that student focused work that I was talking about before, we can actually kind of set up sort of psychometric testing, all sorts of things like that, that actually gives us different kinds of data sets that maybe can then create a framework for the usual data sets that we've been working with.
Okay, so we're talking quite conceptually at the moment. I'm wondering if you could both walk us through an experience from the student perspective and then also from the teacher or academic perspective. What's actually happening, and let's start with the student. What is the student seeing? Sacha, do you want to kick off?
Well, the great thing about analytics is it is sort of invisible in the air out there. For our students, they often wouldn't realise that analytics has been used. For a student, it's just they're potentially reached a point in their studies, they've got a big assignment due, they're struggling, and there's some helping hand reaches out. We try and really connect students to their tutor. We use a high touch model, so students work, 25 students work with one tutor at a time for each of the classes they take, and we really try and connect students to that tutor. So it would be at that point in time. What we try and do with analytics is figure out when a student is having one of those moments where they need just some reassurance or they need a check-in, and they will experience contact from that teacher. And we've built a tool which helps serve up that analytics to the teachers, but lets them overlay their own knowledge, that they're often having their own conversations with students via email. So we don't use, we've chosen not to use automated methods where, you know, students might just get a message that's not in sync, that's not part of the conversation they've already been having. What they'll get is just their teacher reaching out to them at that point in time and asking how they can help.
Okay, so they're not, the students at present are not conscious of what's going on.
Yeah, I think to the extent that we all know and have plenty of examples out there of companies using our data for different things. And I'm sure people are aware that the data is being captured and used by universities as well, but we definitely don't make it front and center for students. It is just a timely intervention, or the way we communicate with students. We contact them through the channels that they prefer, or when we talk to them, we talk about things that are important to them. If they're balancing study with kids, it's about us being able to provide the right information at the right time.
Yeah.
Right. And Marcus?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. We had a system which comes with our learning management system called intelligent agents, which meant you could actually set up queues that if a student didn't do something you were expecting, they'd get a little message. But what we're trying to do in this new dashboard for teachers is exactly what Sacha said. It's not relying on those automated messages. It's still using the same information. So it's giving teachers visibility, but then the teacher chooses what and how they message with. So there'll be a series of templates that the teacher can draw on. So we try to make it easy for the teacher. But as Sacha said, it has to be in the flow of conversation. So they have to know what happened last time when they were interacting with that student, so they can modify the template that is there. And I mean, I think that in a sense should be kind of the bottom line with analytics. It should make it easier for the student and easier for the teacher. This is trying to really make education a service, both in terms of what the teacher does and in terms of what the student does.
Okay. I'm reminded of our earlier conversation when we were preparing for this session, and Sacha said something which I wrote down as being a great quote, which was, so coming back to haunt you, Sacha. So you said analytics is only good if it changes behaviour. So whose behaviour are we trying to change?
Well, I like to change everyone. No, just kidding. I think there's a lot, we've talked about staff and we've talked about students, and I guess the way I think about it is there's a lot of students who are going to be able to be successful in their studies, no matter what, even if things aren't great. That, COVID's a great example. Students were able to overcome the sort of difficulties with that and adapt, but there's always going to be a group of students that have more barriers in the way or need a bit more reassurance. So with our analytics, we're really trying to focus on that group that's not going to be successful without the extra help. So we definitely target them. And then with staff, I think, my background's analytics, and the hardest part about analytics is still people. I don't understand. I chose a degree where I can sit behind a computer and play all day, but the adaptation of the analytics is still the biggest challenge. And for us, as we tried to work with we did work very closely with our teaching staff to design a system and a process that would work for them. It took us years to get there. At first we tried to start out by saying, well, what would help you? Like, what would you actually need? And often what people ask for as their first pass isn't, once they get it, they're like, oh, actually, this it doesn't help me. So it was a really iterative process. I just think it's really important to work hand in hand, but acknowledge that it will take time. If you're building something bespoke, as we did, and it sounds like Deakin has done, and I know there are lots of products around that do this, it will take time.
Yeah, I think that iterative process is so important, and we had exactly the same experience. So often, because analytics is quite a relatively new area, teachers don't necessarily know what they want in terms of what can help them, and so it's only through we've been on this journey for like the last 3 years in terms of doing different versions of these products, and so it's about changing a culture. It's about giving people some new understanding about how this can integrate into their kind of their work. I mean, the title of our session is about personalised education. I mean, education is always that personalised. That's what education is. That's what the teacher is kind of meant to do. So this is analytics is about that individual personalised attention when you're doing things at scale, and that's the kind of you know, new area, and that's why that question of change is so important.
Yes. So we've discussed the changes in the students and the changes in the, say, academic staff and the teachers. And of course, there's the institution itself.
Mm-hmm.
What changes are going on there, do you think? Or, and how much change is possible?
You're probably best placed to ask this, answer this, Marcus. I'm get removed.
Sure. Well, you know, universities are in the process of becoming digital organisations like every other business, and data is at the core of that. So, you know, we've made a huge investment again in processes over, you know, the last 4 or 5 years of building big data warehouses and actually change, like we changed our learning management system so as we would have better access to data. And now we have access to every single thing that happens every time a student or a teacher takes an action in that system. We have a data point for it. Now, that's the first step. Then it's about where does it go and how is it kept? All sorts of privacy issues and policy issues. So, like, data is at every level of the institution. It's changing policy, it's changing behaviour, it's changing systems, it's changing everything.
What do we know about the outcomes so far? We're talking very holistically at the moment, and Marcus, I assume it's not every course at Deakin and every student who is touched by your process at the moment. And Sacha, OES is working with different universities, no doubt on different courses. Link Education is doing the same. They work with a selection of Australian and overseas universities on supporting particular courses. So what changes have we seen so far? What have been the outcomes, do you think?
After you.
Go, Marcus.
Well, I think it's kind of what I said at the beginning. There are 2 levels. So that priority students program is across the whole university. Every single first-year student, their data is analysed in that system. So we're trying to look across the whole university and say, okay, who's in need of extra support? In terms of the more boutique, the Teach Dashboard project, some of those iterative projects we've been trying over the last few years, we've been experimenting to see kind of what works. So in that sense, we're at a much earlier stage. So we have the foundations that work across the university at some level, and that, you know, has improved retention and has had positive effect. But that's kind of, you know, this much of what we could be doing.
Yeah, we've been using analytics both to identify what things we can change, but then we've also been using it to measure. So we've actually done quite a progressively, like quite a slow rollout, because when we introduce a new change, for example, if we were to when we introduce a new technology for our students to use, where they could connect with other students, we do it in a way where we set them really up as experiments or controlled trials. So then we can really measure and see what impact it has. Did it shift retention? Did it improve student satisfaction? So we've sort of done a bit of a slow rollout, but quite an interesting story. We can see 2014 was where we started with one of our partners, where we really introduced this new technology and we began doing interventions with students for the first time. Before that, we had great student service 7 days a week, public holidays, extended hours, but there were still students that, the ones you want, the ones that most need the help, often are the most scared to ask for it. So when we introduced those interventions, we did see a step change immediately. We saw a 2% improvement in retention. And back then, our interventions weren't driven by analytics. We just called everyone that we hadn't heard from in a while. And over the years, we've increased that sophistication, done more propensity modelling, got more targeted with our interventions, and what we really found when we started using analytics was that we've now our retention rates are 5% better again. For that particular partner. So we could see, I guess, doing it without analytics, what you achieved, but when you got the data and data behind it to really hone, that it did make an even bigger difference.
That's really impressive, I think, isn't it? All of those results. And Marcus, you mentioned earlier that you see the future as being the analytics going direct to the students. Can we explore that one a little bit further? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I think one of the issues, particularly for online education, is that students are in a situation where they have to basically self-regulate. They basically have to be their own organisers, and we know that students who are better at organising themselves, regulating themselves, getting on with their own learning, do better in an online environment. And so the interesting areas are, can we actually give students direct feedback about what they need to do next, and what they might not be doing, how they how students good students in the past may have acted, and every student is an individual. So how do we make use of psychometric data which takes into consideration who that student is, and how they might be approaching, what their goals are. Margot in the presentation mentioned the move to short courses and the move of career changes into education. So there's a different type of education, there's a different type of learner. How do we actually take account of different people in different situations and give them the right kind of feedback?
Yeah. I do think it's really key, Marcus, around being able to help students understand the data and, as you said, that feedback and the next step they have to take. One of the experiments we ran actually quite early on was we did surface for a number of years, for about 2 years, data straight to students about their time spent in the LMS. So we shared with them how many days, how many hours, and what that compared to the average student and the students that were achieving really top grades. But we actually decided to pull back on that for 2 reasons. One, we think there's some students where that doesn't actually help, maybe high performers that are up there, it gives them the boost, but we're really conscious the students that we wanted to help, it potentially wasn't resonating with. And also it didn't help them, it didn't link to the outcomes. It didn't, for the student, it didn't say, okay, you're spending this much time in here and this is the grade you achieved, or this is what you should, what you actually need to change about the behaviour. So we pulled back from that just pure delivery of analytics, and currently, researching our next step and where we take that.
Yeah. Okay.
So those what people are doing in the LMS, they might just have their browser open. So they might be spending ages in there, but we don't actually know what they're doing a lot of the time, which is why that kind of individualized event data is really important. And I think another area that's really important is really matching the analytics that we get and the feedback we give to students with specific learning designs. So we actually have to know the structure of the learning journey in quite a detailed way if we're going to give students advice in terms of where they should be at or what they should be doing or what they might do next. And I think, you know, that's the big precursor for a lot of institutions is really coming up. I mean, you know, OES is brilliant at it, and we've been doing that for a long while, but that structured learning design, I think, is the way that we can actually get better value out of the data.
It's a really exciting picture that you're both painting, and I think the whole area is just, it's almost mind-boggling in the speed of progress. There are a number of little red flags that are going off in my brain at the moment. And I think, Marcus, you mentioned data privacy, you know, hearing about psychometric tests and various things, other data dimensions being available starts to have a few little bells going off in there. So I'm wondering what the challenges are. There's also resourcing. This is hugely resource intensive, I imagine, both from the analytics point of view and the intervention from the academic staff perspective. So I'd love to hear from you now. What are the challenges that you see that are present now in this whole move towards analysing students and academic performance?
You go, Sacha.
Yeah, I think from my experience of working, you know, I came from a private sector and government. In working with universities, they just feel they've got legacy systems. It does, and they're big, and you know, all different structures at different universities, but often different departments, you know, working quite independently. And maybe there's a central data analytics team. There's absolutely no way they can service the needs of a whole university. It's just, I think that's a really big challenge. Yeah.
So what would need to happen?
Well, that's a $1 million question. I think you can do. It's easy to get bogged down in analytics, and the people who can do it and have the skills to actually work at it aren't always, or you know, more often than not, they're not the right people to be asking the questions or deciding what analytics to do. So I think that governance is really important. Being, you know, staying focused on the questions a university is trying to answer, what's actually important to them. I mean, I start with, if you're making a decision without any decision, especially if you're in a senior level and you're not using evidence, you're not using data, then like how and why? Yeah, is one of the places I'd start.
Okay.
I think that educating our staff is really important, and this is not something that universities are just going through. Like becoming kind of analytically data proficient is kind of the new skill that, you know, we talk about it in terms of our graduate attributes, that we want our students to graduate with these kind of new data literacies. And, you know, as Sacha said, universities are often dealing with legacy systems and legacy behaviours. And we don't necessarily, I mean, we're big organisations and we do have resources, but, you know, I remember one Vice-Chancellor saying in a talk that he said, when I looked at what I have for all of my technology systems, and then I look at what the Commonwealth Bank spent just on their app, it's about the same. So, you know, we are dealing with things that do take big resources, and I think universities have been we're good at the slow, long game. And so a lot of universities have been putting a lot of effort into this to build it slowly, you know, over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I've noticed in talking to senior people at universities is because this has not essentially been the main game for many people at the higher echelons of universities, it's quite a, you know, it's a very difficult and complex subject to get your head around. And for many of them, I certainly sense that they've been thrown into the deep end of this big pool.
Absolutely.
With COVID, that's when it really came to the attention of the most senior executives in the universities. And it's very hard for all of them to unpick all of the different players that are in the market, to understand what the differences are, what services are being offered, what that means for their university, and how they can best make their judgments. And I think it's almost like we all need a massive education program in what all this means.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to flick now, or say to people that we've got a few more minutes, it's about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to turn to a couple of questions in the Q&A. So if anyone's got a burning question for the audience, for Sacha or Marcus, please drop it in now.
Oh.
Now, I'm seeing a question here that says, what metrics are you using, and what types of data points do you collect to align to those metrics? I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but maybe you do.
So I guess
metrics, yeah. How are you measuring the success?
Yeah, so I guess the two of the main metrics are the two that we've kind of been talking about all along. There's retention. So are we keeping students in the courses? And success. Are students actually passing well? So completion and passing, they're our two big metrics.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll just add as well, we track progression,
Yeah.
obviously through, I mean, I guess it's just another way of saying retention, but sometimes universities will look at sort of an individual course and look at the retention within that course, but maybe not have the data or the ability to look at the whole student holistically as one student, and to be able to actually see how their performance in one course led to them in their next semester. So progression is a key metric for us.
Okay. And with all of this analysis, how much of it is still human intervention, and how much of it is driven by AI and machine learning? You have rooms and rooms of analysts.
Well, I mean, I have in my team, I have there's about 10 analysts at OES. I've got only really one data scientist doing the AI side, and we've got in our teams that deliver the interventions, I've got 10 humans contacting students and 400 teaching staff that we're really enabling. Right. So for us, the AI it's a small part of it, and it's often where universities start. Oh, great, we can use our data to build a predictive model, but that's like the first tiny little block, and the human side around it. Well, maybe being an analyst, for me, that's the modeling's easy. It's the human side around it that's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, universities, because we're highly regulated, we have been using data forever, in that we have to give extraordinary levels of reporting to various levels of government. So the data has always been there and always been reported in some way. But I think I can see a question in the chat around real-time data, and I think that's the different. It's not retrospective, which is that reporting data. It's, can we have access in the moment where it can make a difference?
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I think we're coming close to time. I'd like to finish with a question to each of you. If you were giving advice to the vice chancellors and DVCs of all the universities in Australia, what would you be saying to them about how to approach this this whole area?
I would just say that universities are behind other sectors. We see, you know, banks and social media and gambling companies investing lots of money into it. It's because it brings return. And I would love to see, you know, universities make that same investment. I think it's exciting because universities are doing it for good reasons. They want to help people achieve those career goals.
I would say that, but I would also say work with your students, because I think it's really important to bring students along on this analytics journey. And there have been times when universities have tried to introduce new systems and tried to introduce different data points, and there's been a lot of pushback from students. And data is an incredibly contested area at the moment because of a range of things that have been happening. So I think it's really, really important to work directly with students, explain to students what we're doing, and really get a type of informed consent to move forward.
So it's sort of a combination of go faster, but also go slower. It's go
collaboratively.
faster. Go faster in your decision making and your appetite for these new approaches, but take it more slowly when it comes to consultation with your the students, and of course with the staff, with the academics. So the whole people side, as Sacha said, that's really where it all starts and finishes, and that's where the opportunity lies.
Well said,
well, I think we've reached our time limit. So I'd like to thank you both for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. I'm sure some of our audience will have as well. So Marcus and Sacha, thank you both very much for participating this morning. Bye-bye.